Louisiana's pension system is facing an ever-growing debt complicated by financial decisions from decades prior. If the state doesn't modernize its retirement system soon, an increased burden will be shifted to younger generations. I take a deep dive into those issues facing Louisiana's future tax base and solutions presented to ease that burden. Louisiana's pension system is in need of an upgrade. It's among the most poorly funded in the country. As it stands, the state can only fund a portion of its two largest retirement systems, leaving a $17 billion debt, or unfunded accrued liability. But how did we get here?
We have always had an underfunded retirement system, and that's true of almost every retirement system that's ever created. Because when you create it, you say, all right, hey, everyone now has a retirement benefit, but they haven't been putting money into it. So you start off with you're already in debt.
What's different is how Louisiana handles its debt. Dr. Stephen Procopio with the Public Affairs and Research Council says those financial decisions go back to the 80s.
Our top story tonight takes a look at some of Louisiana's troubled retirement systems. Karen Ackman has been following that story. Karen, what happened today?
This morning, Bella stunned legislators with figures showing that there is $4.8 billion in unfunded accrued liability for the state's 13 retirement systems.
Lawmakers faced a similar pension dilemma back in the 80s.
We'll show to the people throughout the country and the world, people who rate our bonds, people who view us as fiscally unsound, that we have decided to turn the corner on at least this one issue.
The solution was to pay off the entire liability up to 1988 by 2029 using an amortized payment schedule, which means the state has to pay a set amount on a set schedule annually. But later on, that approach was changed. Lawmakers adopted a back-end payment approach, which means money was still being appropriated toward our retirement systems, but just not as much. This decision increased the interest owed on future payments and helped balloon the debt to where it is now.
It really got shoved to really the last 10 years. We had to make our regular payments plus all the stuff we weren't making.
Louisiana is on track to pay off the initial debt from the 80s by 2029, but that's only part of the problem. We're now facing an additional liability, largely from investments.
Everything they make at that rate is something that the state doesn't have to pay because that's less money they have to put in.
The retirement system is funded by four main sources: state employers, state employees, investment returns, and occasionally a 10% surplus from state tax dollars. Public officials and retirement system officials take all of this plus more into consideration. Then they make investments based on how much money they estimate we'll need.
If they don't make that mark, then somebody has to make up the difference, and it's the obligation of the employers, or really the state, to make up the difference.
In the past, if investments did do well, they're put aside for COLAs, or cost of living adjustments, but not the debt itself.
One thing that just happened in the past year is they've changed how they do cost of living adjustments, which we had a truly terrible system of doing it. It wasn't good for the retirees, and it wasn't good for the state. It cost a lot of money and didn't give a lot of benefit. And so we are now on a trajectory to phase that system out, which should put us in a better footing for not creating more UAL in the future.
Fixing the COLA system is just one of the solutions that can reduce the unfunded accrued liability in the future. The Reset Initiative recommends reforming the state pension systems to reduce the risk of more debt, adopting a more portable hybrid system for new employees, combining a traditional defined benefit plan with a defined contribution plan, and lastly, making more conservative investment assumptions. As a voter, you too can influence our retirement system. When you visit the polls, pay attention to Constitutional Amendment Number 3.
It would increase the contribution when there's a surplus or non-recurring revenue from 10% to 25%. So that puts more money into the retirement system, which means then there'll be less need to make additional debt payments, which means there's more money to pay on recurring costs like teacher salaries or employee salaries or really any sort of recurring cost.
It would also spread the surplus money to other retirement systems and extend surplus payments past the original 2029 deadline. But there is a catch.
On the other hand, that money, instead of going to retirement systems, could be going toward infrastructure, because that's another use, or coastal, because that's another use of non-recurring funds. So you really have to weigh out, You know, we have a heavily burdened retirement system. It would be great if we could free up more money by paying this down, but we also have needs on the coast and we also have needs for bridges.
In the end, it's up to you to decide what you think is most important.